And here it is, episode 6 of the Stick to F1 podcast. Anthony Mingioni, Jason Myrtetus, full-blown breakdown of the Austrian Grand Prix. And 3 weeks, 3 races in a row. It's been a lot of fun, but it's gotten more dominant right at the top of the order as we've gone along here, and another dominant win by Red Bull and Max Verstappen.
Yeah, and again, he got his first career Grand Slam. Got the pole, led all laps, got the win, got fastest lap. It was just pure dominance. I mean, as we said, he won this race in a rocking chair. There's just no other way to describe it. I mean, it was just, you watched Max, and it was the only time there was even a concern, I think, during the race was, I think the radio said there was a little cut. There was a cut in one of the tires just to manage it a little bit better towards the end. So he wasn't necessarily pressing for fast. He already had fastest lap already, pretty much in the bag, but they pretty much just wanted him to manage it down the stretch and not have a complete wipeout like he had, obviously, in Baku. So it's what at this point, again, when you get into Max Verstappen right now, 23 years of age, and he is just, this sport very much could be his oyster. Is already becoming his oyster very quickly.
Yeah.
And it was just right from jump. No real, I mean, from the jump, we were obviously happy for Lando Norris getting it at P2 in qualifying, but we knew almost right from jump, Max was going to get the jump. He was going to be in front, and he was going to require himself. It was going to require a mistake on his part. And we're seeing much less of those things from Max of late.
Oddly enough, though, you still see his aggression when needed. And like you saw it at Imola on the opening lap. You saw that aggression where he's a guy that he's got a very wide race car, and he'll get his elbows out, and they're sharp, and he will go for it. But over this stretch that he's on right now, and even Baku, I mean, that's not his fault. He didn't put a foot wrong. He just had a tire failure. Over this stretch, he's just, we use the term on a heater in other sports, in baseball or in basketball or in hockey. And he's just on a heater right now. I mean, he's not putting a foot wrong in every element of the race on Saturday, in practice, anywhere. I mean, he is really just dialed in with that car. That team is so dialed in. They've always been dialed in on their pit stops. They've always been great in that regard. But every element right now is just, you got to team it. And like Christian Horner said to Max after the race, the last couple of races, I think he's used the term, that was clinical. And it was clinical again.
Absolutely. It's, again, not a foot wrong in this race. As we said, right from jump. Again, maturity level, everything else that's going into it for Max. The track itself, certainly, again, the one thing I think that we all said was the one thing that could slow Max down potentially was inclement weather, which only we got a few drops on the track, I think, for just a short period of time before the race began. And then once they were out on the grid ready to get started, it was sunny out. And at that point, it's, you leave that man a clear track, and 3 straights like Austria, like the Red Bull Ring has, the way that car is going, it's determining who's going to be coming in from who's coming up behind him at this point now. I mean, really, right from jump, the minute he has the lead, it's a matter of, okay, does he make a mistake? Less likely as he's going on more and more. Again, this track, I think, does play well to their strengths, and they know the track obviously very well. It is their home track.
Yeah, and the other part of it too, Ant, though, is the reliability of the motor. When they had Renault, they had some reliability issues, which is a big reason they were looking for more power, and they were looking for a little bit better reliability. And they moved away from the Renault engine. They go to Honda. Honda's built them a great power unit this season, and not only has it been incredibly powerful to go along with that whole race package, but it's also been incredibly reliable. That's the other part. I mean, other than Sergio having to basically shut the car down after the win at Baku, on the cool-down lap, I don't think we've seen any issues really with power through that power unit all the way through. Really, we haven't seen a lot of that period end of sentence this season far. No. But
the engine's been, again, their power unit has been absolutely just, I have to give, again, Honda a ton of credit, for putting it, for what they, we have enough reports, obviously, on potentially whether or not, Honda's going to be, leaving Formula One versus, because already we know Red Bull is setting up their own powertrain company and everything else along those lines.
Well, it looks like, I think there was just announced that Honda's going to remain the engine for next year.
Yeah, at least for next year. I think they wanted to see how things go through. And again, they weren't necessarily ready to leave. I mean, they're very
Probably feeling
prominent.
pretty good over there at the Honda factory.
Yeah, they're feeling really good. I mean, listen, it's very satisfying, especially when you're taking it to Mercedes. At the end of the day, when you're taking it to Mercedes, and again, consistently across the board, again, it was a good start, obviously, for any of the, most of the Honda engines, obviously, I believe all of them were in top 10 at the start through qualifying.
Yeah.
All 4 cars were.
Sonoda, I think, finished out just because of 2 dumb penalties.
Yeah, he finished out because of the 2 dumb, because of his, rookie mistakes in this case. And obviously Gasly started 6th and then dropped and then I believe he dropped as the race went on. But still, mostly maintaining a solid performance. Again, great year so far for Honda, especially I think they're taking it really, really to the Mercedes to the Mercedes teams in this circumstance, and specifically AMG.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I don't know. I really don't know if Mercedes is so far on their back foot right now that they can get this back under control. There's still a lot of races. You're 9 races in to a 23 schedule. So there's a lot of time, but because of the new, regulations, cost cap and everything else, this is a different season than any other because the development of next year's car is so far along at this point, and the cost cap to upgrade this car is prohibitive, and it could come at the cost of next year. I mean, they're going to reach a point here where they got to look at it and go, okay, do we, I hate to say, fold up the tent for this year and point to next year, but that may be what they have to do at some point. I don't think we're there yet. I think that's another 4 races away. But
I think, again, going to Silverstone, we'll see.
Yeah,
what happens there again. I think there's a little bit of a confidence thing because they knew Mercedes knew at Red Bull Ring.
Yeah.
That that this was going to be a tough road to hoe, and now
altitude and everything.
And there's no time to change anything.
Yeah.
That's the biggest issue. You got that triple header. The timing of this was just not good for Mercedes at all. For them to have a little bit of time to kind of look back, look at what adjustments that they need to make. That being said, when we look at the constructor standings, they are still within reach.
They are.
It's 286 as of right now. It's 286 for Red Bull, 242 for Mercedes. And again, for all the discussion of who's going to be in that second driver's seat next to Lewis, Valtteri Bottas did what he needed to do to keep them in this race by getting P2 today.
Yeah.
So that's huge for them in order to at least, again, they're within 40. I think it's a 44-point gap, I believe, at this point.
Yeah, it is.
42. So that's still, even at this point, reachable.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, a couple DNFs and really good performances from Mercedes. Red Bull has some bad luck, whatever it might be. And look, those things can happen. And just like they're on a heater right now, bad luck can string together as well in racing. It really can, Of
course, any moment, yeah. We just don't know. You have weather conditions and sudden engine failure, things that you just don't take into account. Debris, crashes, debris on track. That was the big thing that happened with Lewis today, that he did take some damage during that race, which caused him to have to fade back a bit. I mean, he was not going to beat Max on that track today. That being said, if he doesn't take a little bit of damage there, he could very well still, they could have been in number 2 and number 3.
Yeah, you're right. And he gets it on that sausage curb that you go over, and it just damages the floor and the barge board.
Nasty. That curb, everybody forget, he looks at that curb, and it's just like, that's the one thing, it's just you want to avoid that thing as much as possible.
They love the curb to kind of use as a berm in a way.
Yes.
But if you go in too hot and you go over it, and then you're straddling it, you got real problems with that race car just dragging along it, and it can just damage the heck out of the floor of the car. That just hurts the aerodynamics so much in downforce, and then to boot, you've got that fading away, falling away turn 4. I guess it's technically turn 5, but even though, because one of those turns isn't really a turn, it's just a kind of bent straight. But
it kind of bends and moves its way into that next curve as you go down.
Yeah. But that turn, the one where so much drama happened today, which we'll get to, it falls away. It's a high-speed turn, a huge braking zone, and boy, it's an interesting spot on that Red Bull ring. I think it's one of the personality traits that I love most about the track. as a driver, you probably hate that turn the most because you have the other ones that are uphill. You got all that downforce, and you can really go in hard. And then that one is just everything is opposite about that turn compared to what you just led up to leading to it.
Exactly. And you got to deal with the gravel traps. I'm thinking the correct one here. You have the gravel traps to worry about there as well. Saw enough people that got affected by that, and it just rips up the tires as you're going through that. All those things that go into that that make Red Bull Ring can be a lot of fun. That being said, in terms of a race being in doubt, like we normally would kind of like to have on that course, again, there was no competition on this day.
Yeah, there was no overtake in the penultimate lap of Charles Leclerc like Verstappen did in 2019,
right?
Or the run that Verstappen went on in 2018, or what Lewis Hamilton did in 2020. So it's 4 wins now on that track for Max Verstappen. He's got a Styrian win, 3 Austrian Grand Prix wins as well. Let's look at Bottas because he ends up finishing second. You brought it up, Ant. Were you a little surprised that Mercedes initially wanted him to stay behind Hamilton, obviously for protection and the driver's standings, but they realized really quickly that was not going to be a good route because they could end up off the podium or 3rd and 4th and not have that second spot, which Bottas eventually secured. But they let Valtteri through. You're free to race, and he got by Hamilton pretty quickly. Yeah, and then Lando got by as well. But Bottas, a good race for him, and I think he needed a good race. He seemed pretty pleasant.
Again, you're trying to salvage what could have very well slipped away. That this whole weekend could have been a washout for them. They don't end up on the podium. We're not having this conversation that they're still within reach. So, as stated, Valtteri Bottas definitely keeps them within enough range here to in the constructor standings, and also for himself as well. I think this is a big weekend coming up because of all the rumors that we had going into the race, about whether or not about the second seat for next year. A lot of personalities from Sky Sports, Karun Chanduk, I know David Croft as well, and the Silverstone track social as well, mentioning going into July 16th we'll have an announcement with regards to Mercedes as to whether or not who's going to be in that second seat. So this is a proving ground race, I think, for Valtteri, and I think he really did do what he did what he needed to do. He attacked it. We knew he wasn't catching Max. But I think the damage certainly to Lewis's car played obviously a big role in that, and the pace was obviously dropping at that point. So it made sense, and he did a great job, I think, of holding off Lando in this race, because Lando, after the 5-second penalty, after he came in, you want to use the phrase again, on a heater. Lando Norris, the remainder from that pit stop onward, after he got that penalty, absolutely was on a heater as he was all weekend.
Yeah, and he did not agree with the penalty. After the race, he talked about it and said he ran himself off the track.
Who did, Jason? Who did? I mean,
yeah, that's the thing.
Everybody, this was such a nobody was allowed to have their elbows out in this race.
Yeah, and it was very ticky-tack call. It's like bad calls in a basketball game or in a hockey game.
Was there something? And I'm wondering, because they were calling these things, and I'm wondering from last week. And I have to go back and look at the steering again one more time. If there was some things that happened during that race that the stewards were told, they were on red alert that if there's contact to call it this way. And
other than Leclerc on the straight, I can't think of contact. And you had what happened initially with Gasly, but
I think they were very much. I don't know. It seemed like they were hypersensitive to this in this race, and the stewards just had a hugely busy day. Sergio gets hit twice. And I think he's taken the racing line for the second one. I thought the first one he should not have gotten a penalty on. The second one, I could sort of, maybe kind of. But for the most part in this race, it just felt like, they just did not want this thing for them to have their elbows out. There's just no other way to describe it. And it was frustrating, I think, for us as watching the race. And certainly for the commentators who were watching the race as well, they all said the same thing. It's you want wheel to wheel.
Yeah, you want to encourage that. But here's the thing that we don't know yet, and I bet you we'll find out this week in either the Ross Braun column or something, is what was talked about in the driver meeting. Were they forewarned that You know, in wheel-to-wheel racing, you cannot run a guy off, or I mean, like the one turn where Sergio gets it twice with Leclerc. I mean, you look at it, and where Sergio got run off initially by Lando, and then Sergio ran off Leclerc the first time. You look at that, and it's just falling away. The car on the inside is going to filter to the outside. You're not going to be able to give that car enough, a racing line out there. You're just not. Somebody's going to have to back off, and nobody wants to. And they're race car drivers, so they're not wired that way. But you're right. I thought it was a little out of control. You can do a slingshot move there, and we've seen Leclerc do it, especially at the Styrian.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great move. Let the guy go in deep, and then you just, boom, shoot up the inside if you've got the grip.
You do a switchback onto the turn and then immediately shoot up the other side. That's one of the things about Charles Leclerc's racecraft that I love. When he does that.
But you know what else he does really well? And we're going to get to Leclerc in a second because I thought he had a good race and Ferrari did. But you know what he does really well is he gets his car out of dirty air to keep the downforce on the front of the race car when he's got a tire advantage, especially at a track like the Red Bull Ring. He'll take himself out of the dirty air heading into a turn and take a different route to get through that turn with more speed and then attack on the straight. And I think you're right. It's just a race car driver that has a sixth sense of how to find the right air on the track. Like Dale Earnhardt was great at that in NASCAR. At restrictor plate races, he could find a push or air or whatever that other drivers couldn't find. And Leclerc's got this sense for doing it. So when you're in combat with him, that's something you got to be cognizant of. Making your race car wide may not be the right thing to do against Leclerc because he's not going to follow you anyway. He's going to find his own line.
Exactly. And that's exactly what he does. And again, it was kind of fun actually to watch, both of getting into the Ferraris. It was fun to actually watch the two of them kind of duel each other at a certain point before it was very obvious that, Sainz had, the better tread and was ready to go. And at that point of the race and was looking to push to challenge. And he was the guy to challenge Danny Rick at that point.
Yeah.
I think Charles' tires at that point wouldn't have been able to challenge as much. And nobody's going to know that McLaren better than Carlos Sainz.
Yeah.
If you're going to pick a guy to attack and know what that car is capable of, then
strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly. The strength and the weaknesses. And you can see how he was attacking Danny Rick from behind. As much as Danny did his best to defend, it got tough.
Yeah.
It got real tough for him because Carlos just knows the ins and outs of that vehicle way more than him. And it's interesting when you have the other guy, the other guy in the other car have that much knowledge of the vehicle, and the other guy who was signed to replace him still trying to get a hold of that vehicle.
Sainz knows his vehicle better than the one he's in.
Exactly.
It's a great point. That's a phenomenal point, and you're so right. Like I think if you put Sainz in that McLaren car, he would outdrive Danny Ricciardo right now.
Probably at the moment. I mean, it's just. I said this about Carlos really does like that track.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced that a better qualifier, he might have been challenging for a podium today.
How about Sainz though too? He goes from Toro Rosso to Renault to McLaren and now to Ferrari. Yeah. This guy. And I love the strategies they put him on. Let's talk about tire preservation. He's another guy that can take the first stint longer, and then he's got much racier at the end of races. And Ferrari, total tip of the cap to them because they realize his strengths. They're putting him in a position strategically to take advantage of it. He's had some bad luck at points this year. He went off at Baku, and we know some of the things. But all said and done, I am incredibly impressed with Mercedes because my expectation heading into the season wasn't where they are right now. They're much more of a factor toward the front of the grid, not at the top, because Red Bull and Mercedes are on a different level. But other than that, as much as I'm impressed with McLaren because of Lando, I'm equally as impressed with Ferrari going forward. And when this cost cap and the new regs come in next year, I think that Ferrari and McLaren and Mercedes and Red Bull are all going to be just like bunched up together, and we're going to get such variance in results as a result of that.
If you get at least 40 again, it's fun to have two. One obviously having one team lapping the field versus the two that compete with each other this year. You want to get to 3, 4, 5 teams at that point. I think McLaren is definitely in a great position, but they do need obviously Danny to bring things up a little bit more. He's still 20 points down from Carlos hunted him down today, and he's up by 20 points on Danny right now. So Danny still has ground that he has to make up in the circumstance to try to get himself back up the ladder there. But it's been very good. I think Ferrari, especially after Paul Ricard was an absolute disaster weekend for them, they've done a really good job, I think, of getting themselves, picking themselves up, dusting themselves off. And it's such a difference. I mean, we're so used traditionally to Ferrari always being competitive, and last year was just jarring. It was like they literally set themselves up to fail last year.
Yeah. And the whole Seb thing, too, was ugly from a optics standpoint, too.
Exactly. For all those years, that Seb had been, we always think about that funny clip of, you're not a Ferrari fan, with Lee McKenzie from BBC, and it's always a funny thing. And I still remember thinking about that clip last year and watching, what happened to him and going, Seb, I'm guessing you're not a Ferrari fan either.
Not anymore.
It's amazing. Changed suddenly. But again, I know Mattia has been sort of downplaying things with regards to this year, and I often feel, and the way they've performed with the drivers, I feel like we're told one thing, but the drivers are told like something else. Like you guys have ways of figuring this out.
Racecraft.
Your racecraft. You are better. I think there's a good, and I will say it's about Carlos. I think Carlos is a very good teammate too.
I do too.
He and Lando work very well together. They're still friends. I mean, the two of them still go out. They went out golfing in between the Styrian and the Austrian. They're still good. They're still friendly off the track, and I think he does, support his teammate while he strikes a very good balance. I think Carlos.
The only guy he didn't get along with well was Max.
Right. Yeah.
But you had two guys very early, immature,
right, exactly.
Trying to cut their teeth.
And Max is just, Max is, we know he's cutthroat.
Yeah, and he's corrosive.
Yeah.
Like he's not a fine grit sandpaper. I mean, you either love the guy or you don't. You're very often not in the middle ground when it comes to Max. It's why I love him, because when I first started getting into F1, I just saw this kid and I saw what he did in 2016. I just said, boy, the skills are just so off the charts. If he just gains that maturity, and I just love the brashness of it. It's like, hey, just because it's been this way forever doesn't mean that's the way that I got to be. And I just love like the blazing of a new trail. And I think it's gone infectious through the grid, and you see more guys now, driving with that edge. And I think that's more exciting. I think he just brings a level of excitement to it. But Carlos Sainz, you're right, Ant. I'm so impressed with him. And he just makes me a fan of him. Not even just the driver, a fan of him, the way he carries himself more and more each week. And there was a moment in this race, too, I got to bring up before we move on, when Lewis Hamilton got passed Lando Norris. And on the team radio, Lewis said, and they don't say anything on the team radio without knowing that everybody's going to hear it. So but he said he is one hell of a driver. Yeah. And Lando, his racecraft as well, is there as well. It just seems like there's just a lot of respect on the grid. There's some areas where there's not, and there's some things to learn, Nikita Mazepin, and Tsunoda as well, but it's really interesting to me.
Yeah, the rookies, again, they're young, and there's things that have to be learned, especially Nikita coming up. And I know there's been a lot of debate about, was Nikita ready to make this jump this year up to Formula One? He was pretty good, I think, at Formula 2, but there might have been one or two other drivers I probably would have considered ahead of Nikita.
Yeah. But
again, when we're getting into when we get towards the lower end of the table, and you are more of an independent team in this circumstance, and you're looking for sponsorships, you have to, we all know, sort of everybody I think who's in Formula One understands, with the money that was invested in the Haas, what's been kind of understood with regards to who are going to be in those two seats.
Yeah, and they're targeting next year, and Gunther Steiner has made it very clear that this is about just cutting their teeth, getting used to the circuit, the rhythm, and all of those things of Formula One. And after having
a pair of veterans in for such a long time, in Grosjean and Magnussen, and they grew those guys together, and then things just absolutely. You watched, 2 years ago in 2018, where we're in Australia, and Magnussen's on an absolute just a tear, and
they finished 4th, 5th in that race. I watched it last night.
They were 4th, 5th, exactly, and they were just. things
As
just
an American new race team too at that point, pretty new.
Yeah, and at that point, they were a new team on the track. I still remember that comment of Brundle asking Steiner about how many guys you have in your team. I forget the numbers, like 200 and something. And Brundle's eyebrows went up. Says, "I think Mercedes has that amount on holiday right now."
Yeah, they have more than that in the paddock.
Yeah, but that also makes them as well. You know, you watch that and you go, you do want to kind of root for them. You don't. And as Gunther said in the show, I remember this was that. He said, you know, that it can't just conversation can't always just be about Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari all the time. You have to have other conversations. You have to have other stories. That's what makes the sport great.
Yeah, very interesting. We'll see where Haas can go from there. But also in the top 10, Gasly ends up finishing 9th. Fernando Alonso takes the point away from George Russell at the end. Russell just couldn't hold off the old veteran and Fernando, and he picks up at least a point again. And had he not had the incident in qualifying that really put him on the back foot, not by his own doing, but the incident with Vettel where he got the 3-place grid penalty. But Fernando, a decent drive for him this week. Tsunoda ends up finishing out of the points as well after Russell at 12. Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin at 13th. And Giovinazzi and then Latifi. Kimi Räikkönen gets into a bit of a scuffle there at the end with Sebastian Vettel. And I'm not sure what really happened there.
I'm watching going, I don't really see anything that Vettel did wrong there. It's just Kimi
just came too far to the right.
He
clipped
did.
His tire.
He came too far to the right, clipped, and then they were off. And it was just like Kimi's old, instincts of years ago where he's I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what exactly Kimi was doing there, and I'll have to see some of the reports later on.
Yeah, it's inconsequential as it turns out. Neither car was damaged significantly, which is good as well. But
it's felt for George Russell today though more than anybody though. I mean,
he had it ass off.
He drove the gears off that car, and it's just you could see there in that final lap, Fernando had better traction at that point of the race. He had made his change, and Fernando said after the race, he's like, he looked up and he says, "Who's ahead of me?" He said, "Who's ahead of me in 10th?" And he said, "Russell." And he was like, you could literally hear it on the radio, like, could it be anybody but George? Like, he said it at right. Who doesn't? I don't want to be the guy to not get to deny him those, get those points.
Yeah, George is so likable.
He just wanted him to be up higher. And the fact that he's like, well, I have to do what I have to do here,
I'm a race car driver.
A race car driver. And you can see towards the last few turns there as you get to that last, 70 and 71, where you could see, Fernando's braking later than George. George just couldn't hold him off. He just didn't have the traction at that point.
Yeah. Well, a good drive by George anyway. And it's just so nice to see Fernando in the points week in and week out. It really is.
No, it's just fun to have him again, having him back on.
Awesome.
He seemed like 2 years ago when he was when he was still with McLaren, you could see he was kind of getting tired. It almost looked like he got a little tired. He needed to, he still was competing, but there was just some things about it where he looked like he needed a little bit of a step away, and he goes away, and then he comes back this year, and he's in, a Renault car, going forward at least for the next 2 years. At least whether he's closing it, my gut feeling is that these are probably the last 2 seasons for Fernando, but that's gonna be entirely. I could have said the same thing the last several years, since Kimi went over to Alfa Romeo. I don't know. Kimi might be with them. He's going year by year at this point, and seeing how he's feeling.
Yeah, and he can still drive. Those two guys are two of the best guys on team radio too. I love when Kimi gets upset.
Kimi gets shrill, man. I have a friend of mine who absolutely does not like Kimi whatsoever, and I always say to the person, I say, "You just don't hang around Finns enough."
Yeah, you don't.
Like, so if you gotta
it's
hang
hilarious.
Around, you hang around a few Finns, and you kind of get. You then get kind of their mannerisms. It's like they're cool, and then they will just these are people who like heavy metal. These are people who like death metal.
Yeah, so. Finish death metal. Well, the thing is, they'll come on the team radio, and his engineer will say, "Kimi, we're sticking to Plan A," and he'll go, "Well, why the F didn't you tell me that 4 laps ago?" And then he just mumbles.
Exactly. It's coming. You just why'd you tell me I got penalty for what?
Yep. I love it.
last year's For What clip. We just everybody was like, could turn this into a remix.
Yes, yeah. He and then he flipped the bird, of course, to during to Nikita Mazepin for the pit road thing, and I think it was FP2 or FP1, which going by. And speaking of heading into that pit lane, first of all, they need to find a way to redesign that in some way, shape, or form.
I think that's a big problem there. It's like,
it's dangerous.
There, and Yuki screwed up twice with the pit lane thing today, and.
How do you do that twice?
There's got to be some adjustments that's made, because the way that lane goes, especially when you're firing into that final curve, you want to get into that lane, you're just carrying, I feel like there's just too much. You're carrying too much speed into it. It's almost, okay, fine, you have to drop down the gear, but then you got other people that are going to be right up your tailpipe.
Yeah, I mean, you're shading that turn, what is it, turn 9?
Yeah.
Before turn 10, you're shading that turn exactly where you're slowing down the
hard, and then trying to cut a second time. And then you're riding up, then you're riding up into turn 10 way deep.
Yep.
I guess you're supposed to cut gear even further, but I feel like it's really tight to do that in the G-force that's sometimes involved with trying to pull that. I think there's ways that there has to be ways that they can adjust that at Red Bull.
Yeah, no question about it. Let's the driver standings now. Max leading the lead here in the driver standings. He's got 182 points, as you mentioned right off the hop. Ant. He took the Grand Slam. He gets pole position, he wins the race, he leads every lap, and he gets the fastest lap, so he gets the full Monty of 26 points. Lewis Hamilton now number 2, 32 points back in the driver standings, 182 to 150.
Yeah.
Is that right?
It is correct, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Get into it now. You have a 32, so even with a victory,
Wow.
Even let's say Lewis wins the British Grand Prix.
Max doesn't finish.
Max still holds the lead.
Yeah, 26 points is the max.
I think what it'll come down to is I feel like the constructors race will this time the constructors race will be the one that may be the tighter one as we get down to the end, as we get closer towards November and December.
Yeah.
Versus the again, especially if it stays like this will require. I really think at this point now, several weeks of bad luck here for Max Verstappen for him to lose the lead. Got to give Sergio Perez, despite the penalties and everything, still finished. What was Sergio's finish for today? He
ends up 6th because of the penalty.
Which isn't great, but I mean, considering he got tagged twice for penalties.
Yeah.
After starting 3rd, certainly not this 200 race is not going to be one he's going to love, obviously, for obvious reasons, but still ahead. But now he's got to deal with Lando. Lando is now only 3 points shy of him.
Yeah, knocking on the door.
Yeah, so that third place race is really something else here.
Man, Valtteri could get back into that equation as well because he's got 92.
Today was big. Today was absolutely big for Valtteri.
Yep.
Then after that, you start to go into obviously in Ferrari territory with 6th and 7th, where Charles and Carlos are now 2 points, 2 points of each other.
Yeah.
That being said, considering what happened several weeks, at the beginning of this triple header, the disaster that happened at Paul Ricard, the fact that they're still doing what they're able to do right now and have a little bit of a gap here between themselves and 8th is pretty good.
I think when we go into Belgium after the summer break, after the 4 weeks after Hungary to Belgium, if Ricciardo can get on top of that car, and to me the biggest issue for him at this point is probably braking, setting up his corners, because we have not seen him with the braking performance that we're so used to seeing from Ricciardo. If he can get on top of that car, he could have a really big push in the second half and move up those standings as well. But he's got to get a handle on that braking
it's tight
system.
Right now because only a point between him and Pierre right now. Pierre's at 39 right now, so it's 40 to 39 there. So that 8th place spot, he's got people on him.
Yeah. Well, we do have an opportunity to kind of catch our breath here for at least a week. We got a week off, and then we'll head to Silverstone for the British Grand Prix. And the setup for that weekend is really interesting because, you free practice on Friday morning, 9:30 our time here, and then they actually have a qualifying on Friday. That's the qualifying to determine the order of the sprint race, which will come up after free practice 2 on Saturday at 7 a.m., and then the sprint qualifying will be 11:30 on that Saturday, all in advance of the race coming up on the 18th from Silverstone at 10 a.m. start here in North America, which will be awesome. Then they're going to head to Hungary, and then we'll get the break heading into Spa, and the push will be on once again. And when we get to Spa, Ant, it's 3 straight races again. You got Belgium, Netherlands, and then Monza.
It's an interesting dichotomy of tracks too. Unlike this case where we had, with Ricard, Paul Ricard, and obviously only at 2 locations. One was slightly more technical. This one obviously technical in its own way, but obviously much more flatline speed. In this case, you're going to have Spa, which is like which is to me like a perfect balance of technical to speed. The Hungaroring, which is like downforce city.
Yeah. It's like a road course in a lot of ways.
And then you completely go to snap completely the opposite and end up going with your highest speed package for Monza. Yeah. So we're going to get I think we'll get a difference of a more of a wide range of performances here, I think, in that stretch of races than obviously I think we saw here in this track.
And we'll see what people can accomplish both with this week off and then the summer break as well, and as far as adjustments to their race package. So our driver standings for the Stick to F1 podcast, we came in with me leading the way, 13-9. Your podium this week was Lewis Hamilton winning the race, Norris finishing second. You should have got that and got the position, but you got a podium out of it. And you had Sainz. You had 3 good drivers there. My selections for the race, I had Max winning the race. I had Leclerc coming in second and Valtteri Bottas coming in third. So I had the winner, and I had Bottas on the podium as well. So I collected 6 points this week. You collected just the point for Norris. So our driver standings now, I extended my lead to a 19-10 in our pick the podium. So
you're still within. But at this point now, I'm going to be probably hesitant I was counting on last week more of if there was a weather situation and maybe it was one of those take a gamble, see if there's a freak occurrence. But I went with Sainz and I went with Norris last week because I liked the pace that Sainz had. It just, he needed a better qualifier for him to be up higher and for him to have a chance of a podium. So I think at this point now, I think you and I are probably going to be going max across the board.
Yeah, it's hard to go against them.
For the top, and I can't go against them any longer. It's just,
it's undeniable.
It's undeniable at this point, and it's up to Mercedes and Lewis to kind of figure things out. We have 2 weeks here, but how much they're going to get done in 2 weeks is a big question. So we will see. But yeah, that's probably the last for now. For a little while now, this is going to be probably the last Hamilton call I'll make winning a race.
Yeah. Well, we're headed off to Silverstone next. Everybody, thanks for listening to episode 6 of the Stick to F1 podcast. We enjoyed it. Hope you did as well. Leave us a rating and review if you could as well. And in the meantime, we'll talk to you on the next one. Everybody, stay safe, stay smart, and we'll talk to you on the next Stick to F1 podcast.